I'm Aaron Peterson, host of Remake This Movie Right. And this week, I'm going to take the week off and hand it over to 4 personalities that can handle the weight of this particular episode. A deadly plague has wiped out most of the world. The people that remain have split into 2 factions, each led by someone unique. For our final season, because Stephen King is always one of the favorites, we decided we're going to do 2 Stephen King episodes in a row. This week, we're going to remake The Stand right.
Hello, my fiddle cinematic architects, and welcome to Remake This Movie Right. We are a member of the Hollywood Outsider Network. Listen to episodes of Remake This Movie Right on Apple Podcasts, where reviews are appreciated, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. Or you can just visit the website over at remakethismovieright.com. Remake This Movie Right is the show that takes an original film that has an actual remake already in the works most of the time, or in this case really needs to happen badly. Figure out what still clicks and what doesn't, throw a bit of humor at it, and then we determine exactly how Hollywood should remake it. By the end of this episode, we will have the remake ready to roll for Hollywood execs and present it to you in movie trailer form. We are here to tell Hollywood how to remake this movie right. I am your host, Troy Heinrichs, and joining me today are a plethora of Stephen King fans ready to take on this super flu of a movie. First, a man who you hear every single episode on Remake This Movie Right, returning Cy King superstar himself, Mr. Wayne Henderson.
Long days and pleasant nights, y'all. Glad to be here. This is going to be awesome. We've been waiting about a year and a half to finally do this one.
And over in the other corner this week, one of the hosts of the new Castle Rock Zone podcast, covering all things coming out of that mysterious Stephen King town in midsummer 2018, over there on Hulu, Mr. Jeff Gentry.
That's right. Pleasure to be here and talking all things King.
And because no King story would be complete without a walk-in from another version of America, in this case probably a better one, making his way down the Todash Highway himself all the way from Canada, Mr. Rem Lavatois. Hey, Rem, how are you?
Hey, I'm stuck at the border, still trying to get across. They won't let me through without my card.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so epic.
Hey guys, how's it going? Looking forward to doing this podcast. Laws, yes.
I just can't get, I'm just making sure there's a crow not sitting over my shoulder watching me. Oh my goodness. For this episode, if you can't tell already, this is the Stephen King nod for season 4. And we thought, why not tackle the stunning, the breathtaking, the beautiful piece of artwork? At least that's what Randall Flagg told me to say. The 1994 6-hour plus miniseries classic, Stephen King's The Stand, originally airing on ABC, which if you know anything about a King property airing on a broadcast network in the States, this should tell you that the movie was not that great at all.
Doomed to failure.
Doomed to failure indeed. So for those not familiar with this magnus opus that we sat through back in 1994, it's a story about God and the devil versus humanity's last stand. And it all starts on June 13th as a top-secret government laboratory in rural California weaponized a version of influenza, and it accidentally gets released. Dun, dun, dun. A guard escapes a lab and begins traveling across the country, spreading the influenza all along the way, unintentionally known to him, and arrives in East Texas, where he crashes into a gas station and meets one Stu Redman, played by Gary Sinise, and some of his friends have gathered as well. Now, as the man lays dying, he warns Redmond that he had been pursued by a dark man. The next day, the U.S. military arrives to quarantine the town, and the townspeople are taken to a CDC facility in Vermont because Texas and Vermont are totally close to each other. All but Stu succumbs to the superflu, which kills 99.4% of the world's population in just under 2 weeks. Those that survive the outbreak, though, soon begin to have visions, either from a kind, angelic old woman named Mother Abigail, or from the demonic Randall Flagg with an awesome mullet.
Oh, yes.
Mullet is so bad. The two sets of survivors are instructed in these visions to either travel to Nebraska to meet Abigail or to Las Vegas to join Randall Flagg. Now, as the group travels towards Nebraska to the farm of Abigail, she warns that a great conflict is imminent and they must travel to Boulder, Colorado. There, the survivors form a new community called the Boulder Free Zone, where they begin restoring civilization. Meanwhile, Flag sets up the autocratic regime in Las Vegas with the intent of defeating the Boulder survivors. The 4 horsemen for humanity head to Las Vegas, but Stu gets injured on the way. The other 3 travel on where they make their last stand against Randall Flagg with the help of God and some words from wisdom from that sweet old lady. Vegas is destroyed by a nuke and witnessed by Stu and his friend, who find Stu near death from, of all things, the common flu. Stu gets some medication and makes it back to Boulder, only to find out that his kid is born with the super flu, but since both parents are immune, it survives. Knowing they can procreate once again safely, the Boulder community survivors set forth on rebuilding and repopulating the world now that it is absent of Randall Flagg. So, that is 6.5 hours in less than 2 minutes. Remy, what are your brief thoughts about this amazing miniseries?
Nicely done. That's really good editing, Troy.
Thank you.
Well,
much better than they actually did on the miniseries.
We should hire you. Hey, I came into the stand with some hesitation because I'd read the novel, and I'd read the novel probably 2 or 3 times before seeing the miniseries. And the trick I've always found with an adaptation from a book to a movie is that I've got my characters already built in my head. So when a movie or a TV project comes along to adapt it, I have to think, oh, are they going to get the characters right? And are they going to be the kind of characters that match what I've created in my head? So I was a little hesitant because The Stand has always been my favorite novel, and I know it really well. And I actually avoided watching the TV version of The Stand for several years, and then finally gave in because I thought, hey, they might actually do this really, really well. And then the ABC did this version of The Stand, and I liked a few elements of it, but I have to say I'm probably going to be one of the more vocal critics of this because I think as far as adaptations go, it was the type of adaptation that shouldn't have been done for ABC, and it shouldn't have been done in 1994. I think this was a piece of material that was done a little bit too early, and it was a little too family friendly, a little too light. It needed to be a lot more dark to really get across what the Stephen King material was trying to portray. So it had a few moments, but largely I think this was a fail.
Yeah. My take on it was I did not get to see this when it originally came out. And that was because it was my beginning of college. And so I had read the book only one time before that. And so the first time I saw it, for what it was okay, but nothing is ever going to compare to the book. You just have to take any adaptation of King and say, this is going to be different than the book, and I've got to judge it differently. Saying that, there are characters and casting I thought they did really well, and so now when I listen to the book, which I'm currently doing, I see those characters in those spots, and some of them just totally did not work. But I totally agree with Rem that this needed to wait until after we had things like Lord of the Rings and some other, networks for it to go on, because for what it did, it was okay, but it was just a little too soon for what it was needed. So I appreciated what they tried to do, and it was event TV, but for me, there was a lot of things lacking in such a big source material.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jeff and Rem were saying. And for me, I'm one of the unfortunate ones, maybe. I saw the miniseries first back in the day.
Interesting.
Well, I wasn't much of a Stephen King reader back then, and when I saw the size of the book, I was scared, more scared than I would be of Randall Flagg. So watching that miniseries, what's funny to me is that, it's from the early 90s, but it looks and feels like it's from 1979.
It does.
I mean, the direction, the filming, the dialogue, some of the music just seems a lot more dated than it was. Maybe they did that on purpose, but I doubt it. So I give them props in the ambition department, but and some of the casting, like Jeff said, is pretty good. But the way they were directed, It just didn't work. And like Rem said, way too light. There were things that were very bad, very dark, very ominous, and very dangerous, which in the miniseries, it didn't seem all that bad.
I think Logan's Run actually looked way better, like a 2000 era movie compared to this.
Yeah.
When you say 70s movie, it was more like 60s potentially. It could have even been a silent film for about 90% of it because nobody talked. They just stared at each other longingly and just walked down the road with a lot of overture music that just didn't really fit the film.
Slide guitar.
Blue Oyster Club, right? What? Oh, man. It is definitely a masterpiece, to say the least, for what you can do to bring it onto broadcast television. But this is something that absolutely needs to be remade, and that is what we will tackle here this afternoon. But before we get into our pros, cons, things we loved about the movie, etc., if you have your own pitch or thoughts on this week's show, email us at remakethismovieright@gmail.com. And to get you kind of warmed up, here's a clip from the 1994 Part 1 of The Stand.
Help my wife and my baby, they're sick, they need help!
Okay, mister, they're fine. You just want to sit right there. The ambulance is on its way.
We didn't get out in time after all.
Just try to rest yourself, okay? Just take it easy now.
Feet malfunction, otherwise we'd have died in the compound. Project Blue.
Come on.
And I told you I ain't got time to throw a line over that dog's head. You buy me now.
What's he got? You got any idea?
Maybe it's food poisoning. You know, he's got California plates here. Maybe he's got some bad chow at a roadside stand or something.
I hope you're right. This is a cholera back in 58 down near Nogales. This is what it looks like. Sally and the baby, they were sick since Salt Lake City, but I felt fine till this morning. But are you sure, Sally, my baby, you're okay? Huh? Yeah. There was a man with us some other time. He was a dark man. I was looking through the rearview mirror and I'd see him just sitting there grinning at me. I thought I could outrun him. Can't outrun the dark man.
All right, so Jeff Gentry, you are an avid King person. You have the new Castle Rock Zone podcast coming out. What about The Stand did you love?
What about The Stand that I loved was some of the character interactions and just the world setting. I think they did a good job with some of the characters. I really felt like the casting of Sinise was good, and some of those casting bits and pieces. I thought the road aspect of it, of the travel and the conveying of how empty America was because of the super flu and the effects of the flu were done well. I think, there were bits and pieces here and there. The casting of some of the characters was a bit off, but I appreciated just how they took these two factions going at each other and looked at what would happen and when society broke down. It's not done to the full capacity that it can be done, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the setting. I do feel like that they tried to get those little beats of current culture in there to make it feel real and a part of the world. So, like I said, I like the visuals, the showing of this is truly an American picture of this was taking a place in America, which was the focus of the book, and the two sides drawing their people together and the forming of those two groups. It could have been done much better, but I enjoyed seeing how they pulled these two groups together, and the main characters that they focused on. I enjoyed the storytelling that we saw of getting to see their backstory and how they came to choose one side or the other.
And for me, I liked how the miniseries started out with Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that did a good job of setting the tone. I also liked that they had Rob Lowe in there because I mostly knew him from Wayne's World.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, he still looks almost the same today. So I think Rob Lowe actually does have a deal with Randall Flagg and could probably still play the same role. I thought he did a pretty good job playing his character. Other than that, oh man, Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? That's about all I can think of.
He's a righteous man. So looking at the story about what I liked, I know I said at the beginning that I was going to be very critical of it, but there were a few elements that were translated really well. And I think as far as characterization go, a few of the cameos were really strong. Ed Harris as General Starkey, Kathy Bates doing the cameo as the radio announcer Ray Flowers, really, really strong there. Matt Frewer as the trash can man was excellent. Good casting there. And I think my favorite is actually Ray Walston, who played Glenn Bateman. And Glenn tends to be the character that I gravitate toward the most. He's the more cerebral of the bunch. He sort of looks at what's going on and says, I'm not so surprised by this. And as they start to see the coalescence of civilization come back together, he's asking those questions. If we organize, are we going to be organizing back together the same way that we did? Are we just going to remake the whole mess like we did before? He's got an interesting perspective on sociology and what's going to happen to these survivors. And I really love those conversations where we get Glenn talking about where society is headed. And I think my favorite part was when Glenn was actually in jail and meets Randall Flagg for the first time. And he goes, "We made such a big deal out of you and you're just a cockroach scurrying around doing cockroach jobs." And to see him face down Randall Flagg, the Dark Man, so well. It made him one of my favorite characters. And I think the other thing that I really enjoyed most about this movie, this series, was, as you had said, Troy, about the four horsemen of the apocalypse going west from Boulder to Las Vegas, walking on foot. Love that music. They had this really great violin, sad music that I just enjoyed so much. And I kind of get goosebumps thinking about it. So a couple of good pieces of casting, a little bit of good music. And I think that's kind of what stands out for me mostly.
Yeah, I love that it was the four people going to face Randall Flagg to give that kind of four horsemen of the apocalypse feel. And I loved how Jeff also mentioned Lord of the Rings and how maybe we should have waited for that, because this was written as kind of Stephen King's, I hate to say the word homage, but he kind of penned it as a Lord of the Rings type of story, in the sense that he wanted four unsuspecting heroes to have to go up against a big bad. You have Randall Flagg, who has this kind of all-seeing eye as the crow flies around through most of the movie. And then along the way, Stu gets hurt, and it's almost like Gandalf dying and leaving the last three hobbits to continue on all by themselves. So you have a lot of similarities. And because of that, I really enjoyed the progression of that group as they move forward towards their confrontation with Flagg. And that gave me kind of a nostalgic feel for the movie in that regard, because it really made it enjoyable, and you could relate to it because it had been something that you'd kind of grown up with as a kid, reading Tolkien and seeing that mesh together. But I mean, this movie really has some of the most armpit of disaster filmmaking in it. I mean, the special effects alone are just horrific. Visual, because there's makeup effects, which were absolutely fantastic, but then the special effects, the computer generated stuff, granted it is 1994, so we have to cut them some slack, but those were just abominations, to say the least. So for you, Wayne, and we always joke that The Langoliers is not a great movie, but at the same time, I think I enjoyed The Langoliers more than The Stand. So what for you made you go, gosh, this is really, really a bad miniseries?
Well, I think you touched on a lot of it. Considering the amount of star power that's in the television miniseries version of The Stand. I mean, you run through those list of names that you guys touched on earlier. We recognize almost all of those names still today. And the fact that they're in this Stephen King mega production, and it just, I don't know if it got crushed under its own weight. Did they run out of money? Did they hire the Langoliers visual effects crew to come in to clean up on the movie? I don't know. I thought like I touched on just briefly at the beginning, the dialogue that was written is not the dialogue that's from the book. And then the direction some of the scenes, like even some of the scenes that in the book were really intense, like Gary Sinise's character in the hospital and the doctors coming in to poke and prod him and wearing their protective hazmat suits, and that exchange where he's threatening to, let his illness in, which he doesn't even have. It just came off kind of comical, and the sound, even the sound production in that scene, I'm like, this just sounds like it's from the 60s or 70s. So I just think it was overly ambitious. Maybe they ran out of money. Maybe they just didn't know what they were doing. But with that much of an all-star cast, it should have been so much better.
I think I like your point there about maybe they ran out of money, but they certainly ran out of something, or maybe they just didn't have that something to start with. And
I know what it is. What? They ran out of Ka. Oh, wrong series. Sorry.
I thought they ran out of chicken.
Come down and eat chicken with us, beautiful. It's so dark. Yeah, and
or not in this case.
We talked about that line offline on Messenger, and that's the chicken scene is something that I wanted to bring up. And as I looked over my pages and pages of notes to sort of distill what didn't work with this and where this failed, I keep coming back to the direction. And this was directed by a fellow named Mick Garris. And he also directed a TV version of The Shining, which I have no intention now to watch at all. Because I'm going to stay with the Stanley Kubrick film. I think this really boils down to a failure of vision and direction. And like you said, Wayne, the choreography, the fight choreography, so bad. The part where Fran and Stu are making this romantic connection by the river should have been beautiful, but it was clunky and stupid. Stephen King's horror material is the kind of stuff that needs to be translated properly for adults. And I can understand you've got properties like The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption. They work really well on a standard network, even though they are edited to an extent. But for something like The Stand, this is not a G-rated after-school special. This is a dark series. Needs to feel dark. Sort of like what Ronald Moore did for the reimagined Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
That's the direction they should have gone with this. And I think, when you talk about powerhouse casting, Troy, you got a lot of names here that are recognizable. Miguel Ferrer, who was really great. Gary Sinise, like you said, Jeff, was really good. But Molly Ringwald as Franny Goldsmith was a huge casting mistake because she didn't understand the material and she didn't understand how to convey what Fran was all about. I think they were looking more for the name factor.
Exactly.
And I have to say, Jamie Sheridan as Randall Flagg was one of the most disappointing bad guys I've ever seen. Mullet is great, business up front, party in the back. And he conveyed that sort of sinister humor that Flagg has. But when it came to the real dark menace, he couldn't deliver that. Jamie Sheridan did not present a character that I could be afraid of in the way that I need to be afraid of Randall Flagg. So I think, shot composition, staging of the scenes, directing those actors to convey the material that's necessary to really deliver the message of The Stand was not done. And then you've got overdone characters like Ratman, little mousy Julie Lowry, Ray Booth, so completely over the top as to be unbelievable and caricature. So, I go back to Mick Garris, and think that a more experienced director would have known how to translate this material properly. But unfortunately we didn't have that.
That's why the jail scene is probably the best scene in the entire movie, because when he laughs, it's like, "You're Randall Flagg?" I'm like, yeah, because we couldn't believe Sheridan was the Flagg either the entire 6 hours.
We made such a big deal out of you. Apparently for no reason.
Yeah, following up, I totally agree about the directing, but I also think part of it suffered from whoever took the character studies and giving the actors their kind of background to be, how to be motivated and character sketches. Whoever took that and gave that to those those actors did a disservice. I agree with what you said about Molly, because I think, yes, that was star power and overacting ability. And I think for me, the things that don't work are the lack of focus on the things that need to be important, because the book and King's work succeed because they take a look at, he gives you such background and history on characters and places, and he does that well. But translating that to a mini-series, you've got to pick and choose the action versus character. And I think they, like Troy mentioned, they had these scenes where you're seeing the hero shots where they're just walking to Las Vegas, which is fine, but they linger too long on those. There's times where they needed action and they had the character or just silent shots. And they had times when they needed, the balance wasn't there. So for me, whoever took King's work and adapted that script to TV did not do that well, because there was not the balance that needs to be there between those character and those history and action things. So that's what, after I read the book and a second time listened to it, that's where I found it lacking, is the translation to screen. And part of that is directing, and part of that is whoever was supervising the adaptation of the script.
And see, I think I take it one further from you, Remy, on the direction side. I think it's also on the editing side. I felt a lot of the sequences were very jarring, especially as you go between each night. Granted, you had to edit it for television back in the day, but as you watch it now, the jumps between parts 1 and 2, and especially the jump between parts 3 and 4, it seems like half the story was missing to me. And I couldn't focus in on what was the parts that they dropped, because it was so bad that I couldn't tie it together, that I couldn't even go back to the source material and try to figure out how to tie it together. And there's a few of those places where they're jumping between the different groups of survivors, especially in part 2 through the dreams, where I don't know if enough context was set up to even warrant the need for the second part at all, to be quite honest.
It's a good point about editing for commercial breaks too, because so much of the TV we watch now is, premium cable, where commercial breaks aren't there. So that's a factor as well, eh?
Well, you can see all 4 parts of this on YouTube, as I did, and thank God for 2x speed is all I'm going to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It was pretty bad. Now, if you can believe it, though, I mean, after all of the crap that we're giving The Stand, this miniseries, it actually won 2 Emmy Awards in 1994, if you can believe it.
Really?
Yes, it won for Outstanding Makeup for a Miniseries or Movie or Special with Steve Johnson, Bill Corso, David Dupuis, and Joel Harlow. And then it also won for Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Miniseries or Movie. Graham Maxwell, Michael Rushak, Richard, I can never say Richard's last name, Schixnander. Does that sound right, Raymond? And then Don Summer. So
that's surprising for sound editing. Like you said, Wayne, the audio was not great here.
And maybe
there was nothing better at the time.
Yeah, maybe it was the sound effects that they used and how they were able to bring it in and give you the environment sense. Because I did feel a sense of environment, especially as they get to Boulder. There's a different musical score for Boulder versus Vermont versus Texas. The animal sounds, the crow obviously coming in when the crow needs to be there. So I could see where it's a possibility. Again, it's a miniseries, so there's how many miniseries are going on back in that day to choose from? Was there like one of 2 and they had a 50-50 shot at winning?
Oh, maybe.
I have to go back and look to see who was actually up for the nomination. But yeah, 2 Emmys for this miniseries. So not all bad, but not all great either. So let's get into some trivia. Mother Abigail's house, and maybe this is where the budget suffered, but Mother Abigail's house was actually in a cornfield that was constructed to full scale on a soundstage. The corn stalks were flown in from Florida. Why you would get corn stalks from Florida to fly it all the way to LA is beyond me. And they flew it all the way over, and by the time that the corn got there into Utah, where they did this scene specifically, all the corn was dead, so they had to basically make fake corn out of construction, and it cost nearly $80,000 to get all that corn that the rats.
God.
And it looks terrible.
Looks terrible. It's like the rats had eaten it or something. The shot where the car nearly runs over Rob Lowe's head, that was actually shot in reverse. So when we see it, it's actually played backwards.
Oh, that's clever.
As the car drives in.
Yeah.
And then we had Mike Lookenlind, the man who is a Sentry alongside. Oh my gosh, is that Stephen King standing next to him? It sure is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stu walks up to him, and Bobby is how he's addressed. Like, hey, Bobby, how are you doing? Well, anybody that knows Mike Lookenlind, he made Bobby Brady in the Brady Bunch.
That's right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So there's a nod there.
That's why the name's familiar. Okay.
And then Rob Lowe, who plays the deaf mute character Nick Andros. Did you know that in real life, he's actually deaf in his right ear?
Oh,
Wow.
Method
I
acting.
did not know that.
Oh.
Method acting all the way.
Method acting. I'm going to destroy my hearing for this part.
Now, Randall Flagg's Las Vegas penthouse suite was actually built on a soundstage. The room had called for marble walls and floors, which was constructed from, of all things, particle board painted to look like marble tiles.
But that did look good. That was good. Set direction.
I might
Good
do that.
sets.
Get some particle board for my countertops and just paint it. I'll do that when I show my house off when I go to sell it.
If you have the right artist, you can make anything look good.
And take out all the chairs because only liars sit in chairs.
That's right.
Ooh.
The station Ray Flowers works at has the Mike Flagg's WZON. This is the name of the real radio station that King owns himself in Bangor, Maine.
Oh, neat.
ZON, as in the zone?
Oh, boom.
The Castle Rock Zone.
Wonder where that came from. After Stu breaks his leg, the cane he is using is the exact same cane used by the antagonist in Stephen King's Storm of the Century.
Yes, indeed.
Prop recirculation. And then, Remy, you had one about some book trivia.
Yeah, I was actually looking around for more material on The Stand, and I ran across a book that's been written on the novel The Stand, and it's written by an author named Jennifer Paquette, and it's called Respecting the Stand, a critical analysis of Stephen King's apocalyptic novel. And you can get this on Kindle, and I did, and I've been reading it. I actually, maybe a year or two ago, when we were talking about doing a podcast on The Stand, I sort of reached out to her on Facebook, and I found her, and we had a little bit of a chat about her writing it. And she says, and I'm going to quote her here, she says she wanted to approach it from the perspective of a grad school student who thinks that King is worth serious study, not as just a pop culture icon. Though he is that, but as straight up literature. Because, we tend to look at Stephen King material and the horror genre, and there's this kind of like what sci-fi used to be looked at as, oh God, it's cheesy and kitsch. And she wanted to take a more serious approach to it. So, what we'll do is I'll give you the link, Troy, if you want to put it into the show notes so people can go and find Jennifer's book, Respecting the Stand. And she digs into the characters, what they represent. She digs into the crisis, the fight versus good and evil. It's a really interesting read. If you love The Stand, and the story and the characters, to go more into it and what King was thinking when he created these characters, called Respecting the Stand. And we'll put that into the show notes if you don't mind. Absolutely.
That sounds great. And speaking of respecting good and evil, why don't we hear a clip from Stu himself as they are prepping for their trek into Las Vegas inside of the washout between the bridge.
It's God's plan.
Shut up about God. I'm sick of hearing about God.
This whole trip was based on the idea that Mother Abigail knew what she was talking about. That's right.
It's not right. It's not right. This isn't God's will or God's plan. It's a washout. And you got a broken leg, Stu, and I'm not going to leave you here.
Larry, listen.
What?
Listen. Listen. When we came on this trip, we put our lives in the hands of Mother Abigail's God. Now, that hasn't changed. If he wants me to eat, he'll send food. If he wants me to drink, he'll send rain. It's his business. Yours is to go against Flag. Now, you got to do that. You got to go without me. Do you know how crazy that sounds? Do you know how totally damn crazy that sounds?
All right, well, this is what we know about the potential remake of The Stand as of April 2018. Josh Boone, who might be known best for The New Mutants recently, he has an adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand that he was originally planning on making into a 4-part, very faithful to the book movie franchise that would explore the tome in full. Well, he's readapting that version into what is now reportedly becoming a 10-hour limited series over at CBS. This comes from the Tracking Board, which reports that Boone's TV adaptation will air on CBS All Access, the network's streaming subscription service, which is great because if it's on broadcast again, it's going to suck.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We'll see how dark they can actually get, though, for the CBS All Access audience. Now, when you think about it, though, when Boone was originally doing this for the movie property specifically, he actually pegged one Matthew McConaughey to play Randall Flagg.
Oh, all right.
Which is interesting.
Might be time to change that idea.
Yeah. This group here obviously knows, and many of you might have that are listening, because we did do a Dark Tower remake last season, that he was Randall Flagg, or a version of Randall Flagg, in the Dark Tower movie from Sony last summer.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy. It's amazing how it all ties together. It is really all connected at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Some level of the tower is calling. Now, why they needed 10 hours for this miniseries versus the 6 that we already got, I still don't understand. But if they can give us a movie like The Dark Tower in under 2 hours, maybe The Stand really could be condensed into a very short form version that is actually decent. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to take a stab at maybe a 2 hour, it might go to a trilogy. I don't know how this is going to go because it's all kinds of crazy when you got 3 people trying to remake a movie here. But we're going to do our best guess and best shot at remaking The Stand from all of us here. Now, all selections moving forward during our course of the remake are settled on a best of 3 vote. In the case of a tie, if it is 2-2, then I will be the tiebreaker as the extra person. Then, as each host is receiving also 1 cut. So for those that have not listened to Remake This Movie Right before, anybody that really says, man, I really like that idea, I want that in the movie, I can yell cut, and boom, it's immediately in the movie. Or if you just want to be your inner Randall Flagg, you can say, that sucks, I'm putting my thing in, and block somebody else with your cut as well.
Okay.
Either way, it's all part of somebody's grand plan, I'm sure. So, who has the first idea that they would like to throw out for the remake of The Stand?
I wouldn't mind going first this time, just because.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Trailer himself.
In a world. No. First off, I think we cannot miss the opportunity to have the date that it all breaks out be June 19th. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen, brother.
I have the 19 in there. And in my version, I'd like to set it in modern day, and much like in the miniseries, start out with some slow reveals about the illness and the repercussions, like in the book. And the original miniseries did have a bit of a slow reveal, but a little more slow, like in the book. And since it's set in modern day, let's go ahead and have Captain Trips not only be a superflu for humans and other animals, but it also destroys electronics connected to cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Ethernet, and all of that. Because since the original didn't have really the internet or cell phones, I think we need to take them out of the picture to make the story really work. Because if the original had had cell phones and the internet, many of the situations in the overarching story couldn't have happened.
Oh, good point.
Because people could just call the other end of the world, the other end of the country, and warn them. But so we got to take them out. Somehow Captain Trips is able to do that as well. And not just to prove that we're world-centric, but I do think we need to touch on what's going on in the other countries around the world. I mean, when I was first reading The Stand and watching the miniseries, I originally first thought, well, maybe it is just a North America thing. The rest of the world doesn't even care. So discuss what's going on in other countries, and maybe some of the countries get a twisted outlook and actually worship Captain Trips. You know, maybe some of the less technology advanced countries might even have a slight advantage by worshiping Captain Trips in the coming big battle. And we really need to see and feel everyone's loss and suffering. We mentioned it earlier in this episode of the podcast. Some of the big, dark, ominous, evil things from the story, the way they were presented in the miniseries, just seemed about as bad as the regular flu, or maybe not even that bad. So it needs to be bad. And speaking of bad, RF, Randall Flagg, they touch on it a little bit in the miniseries and in the book, but he's kind of flip-floppy. He should have 100% zero tolerance in his view of drugs and alcohol, because in the miniseries and in the book, he is totally against drugs, but he seems to allow some of his team to drink some wine and stuff, and that's such a blurry line. So 100% zero tolerance, Randall Flagg, some of the folks on his team, they're going to get offed in very violent deaths just for having a Zima or a glass of wine or something. And the final showdown, we can still have it in Vegas because there's a lot of things about Vegas that makes that work. But let's have it be 100 times bigger and more surreal than what we saw in the original miniseries. But the only question that I have for the ending, which I'm going to leave to you guys, because I'm not sure how we're going to represent and present Randall Flagg's disappearance. Is it going to be more vague than in the TV series or more upfront about it? So, do we want to talk about Easter eggs just now or a little later on?
Oh, yeah, you could throw them in. Which Easter eggs do you want to throw in there?
Now, although I'm not a fan of gratuitous Easter eggs, like we got way too many in the Dark Tower movie, and don't get me started on Ready Player One, but just a few. I think the brief scene from the Dark Tower series where in Wizard and Glass, Roland and the gang are briefly in Topeka, Kansas, which has also been decimated by Captain Trips. Maybe we can just show a Tokuro Spirit and a bottle of Nozzle soda in there. We just do a couple little things and not go overboard.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we got. And I want to hear how we flesh it out from Rem and Jeff Gentry.
I was actually kind of hoping that when he brought the Coca-Cola to Stu, when he's down there with his broken leg, I was hoping it was going to say nozzle on the side of the can.
Epic.
But no, alas.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it, thinking about how we take this story, which has a lot of references for its time, especially the music, the Blue Oyster Cult and music from the Coasters. Bruce Springsteen, he likes to put song lyrics at the beginning of each chapter. I think in this particular case, we'll less be able to use those kind of musical reference. I hope you guess my name, I think one of the things that Wayne said that I really like here is, one of the components is that we'd have to lose the internet. We'd have to lose, any form of digital communication. My initial idea was if we went away from the idea of a flu, what about the idea of a solar flare that knocked out the grid? I remember reading some information that indicated that if a solar flare with sufficient power hit the Earth, it would knock out communications globally. And that could take out up to 90% of the human population within 1 year. So that may be a possibility. Maybe it's a flu and a solar flare, but something that knocks out the grid, because Wayne's totally right. If we're in the middle of the apocalypse, I can't be taking pictures of, a can of Spam and putting it in my Facebook. That's just, it's not going to work. So
a selfie with Randall Flagg.
That's right. So what I would do is I would indicate some sort of instance where we're pretty much back to the 1800s without power and we're doing everything, without electricity. So I like the idea of something around an EMP or maybe some sort of solar flare that takes out the grid. And your idea, Wayne, of it being global, I think is really important too, because we are more of a global civilization. And there was a part in the book that I thought was interesting, and it was a small bit where the U.S. government's response to Captain Trips knocking out North America was to take vials of it and distribute it to other countries and infect other countries, which is super dark. And they didn't mention it in the miniseries, but it is in the book. So I think that's an interesting thing too. And there may be something in value in how we learn from other cultures that are already less technologically advanced, because that's soon how we would be. question I have is what kind of goal do we have for Randall Flagg? Because that's something that we never really get a good picture of. He seems to be a chaos agent, a force for radical change and just that sense of chaos and destruction. But what is he working toward? And as a person who I tend to be more of an atheist than a Christian, I think there might be value in looking at the connection of good versus evil in more than just a Christian context, because other cultures have their own ideas between black and white, good versus bad, and dark versus evil. And how we would exemplify that, of course, is open to interpretation. But I like Wayne's idea of a larger sense of what's going on in a global perspective. I did some looking to see where we might be able to center these two cities. I was actually looking around on a map of the United States, finding Air Force bases to see if we could find one that would be close to a city that wouldn't be too far away from a city like Vegas, which would be the sort of the bad city. You know, and after looking, I think I've come back to the idea that Vegas and Boulder, Colorado are still good locations. I still like both of those. Because you've got the Rocky Mountains as this great divide between the two. So that's kind of where I've got, maybe something around an EMP, because we know that we're so technologically dependent. That's going to take out a good chunk of the population all on its own.
Okay, I'm going to be the little bit of the oddball here.
Okay.
But I really envision this as a 3-movie series, kind of breaking the action with like movie 1 being the outbreak of the virus and the 2 factions being called. Movie 2, the factions continue to form and move west to establish the communities, and then movie 3 where the communities are solidified, and then we have the final showdown. But the storytelling device of this is, I would still set this movie in the context of the book. Now, the book is kind of a weird mashup because it's 90s, but some of the things are really 70s and 80s references. So I would still set it in the 70s and 80s. So this would be a period piece, and it would get around the technology issue that way. But the narrative mode that I'm using is a storytelling mode. We see a video monitor with news clips, security footage, and then we hear someone reading to kids through diaries and journals. So you have this aspect of somebody is telling and showing about the events. And so we have this, these journals being told, and then we flip from, a narration about that event to that character. So we, maybe hear from Franny's journal, and then we flip and see those events. So the storytelling narrative is what leads us into the firsthand accounts. And this kind of continues through all 3 movies. And then at the end, I'm going to go a little bit cheesy, but we see this is a husband and a wife with preteen, teen kids, and the husband is Peter, the son of Stu and Franny, and the wife is one of Larry and Lucy's twin girls, and they're teaching their children about these events, so hopefully it won't happen again. So that's kind of how I got around the modern technology is, we're setting it as a historic piece that we're seeing. So that's kind of how I kind of re-envisioned it, and keeping true to what the book was, but using this storytelling narrative to get around some of the modern day things that might run into and cause us issues.
Interesting idea. I like that.
And then Peter was the son, right, of Stu and Franny, right?
He was Franny and her boyfriend's son, but
Jess.
Jess Ryder. But he was the first real child born there in Boulder after the super flu hit. So, but he was pretty much adopted by Stu there. So, yeah.
It's interesting because I look back at this and I really like the concept of the no technology. So now whether we set that in the 80s or we set that in the modern day and then do the solar flare kind of idea, the global, I think, is what's hard because for me, when you're trying to talk about this movie and keep it's already expansive in enough of ways because you have so many different locations in the States and so many characters that you have to keep track of. I would vote against the global aspect of it, especially if we went with the solar flare, because then you don't have can I affect another country because they're also facing the same problem, so that everybody's kind of on the same playing field from that regard. I like the solar flare idea also because it's kind of like Hell on Earth. If you look at it from that evil, how does Randall Flagg actually come to be on Earth specifically, or in this Earth? And maybe the solar flare is his methodology in order to make that happen.
Oh, okay.
I do like the husband and wife narration, or the kids narration portion from Jeff. I would say I would do it a little bit differently, though. I would escalate that to where it would be Peter or maybe one of the twin girls, but they're like on their deathbed. So it's almost 3 generations later, where they might be facing a return of some evil entity or something, and maybe they're prepping for something. We don't know that they're prepping for the return of Randall Flagg, potentially. And so they're kind of prepping everybody and through that storytelling narrative, and then you get the reveal at the end when they come in, and it's like, yeah, this has all happened before, and it'll happen again kind of thing. Maybe like a Battlestar Galactica nod.
Yeah.
As we see a solar flare approach the Earth, and now you have a whole new generation that can take up the charge.
So here's a thought about the globalization perspective. Maybe I can solve this. So if we're going to be focusing on North America and particularly the United States, what if some of our characters, what if we focused on the fact that some of our characters are from other parts of the world?
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then
I can definitely see that.
Yeah. So then we've got a character who comes from Russia, or a character who comes from, the Ukraine, or from Asia. So maybe by taking our characters, which in the 94 movie, a lot of white people, and maybe what we need to do is a little more global representation in the casting. And then that would give us our opportunity to have that global perspective.
I could see that.
And what I like about that is that actually might be a nice, I mean, you hate to say that every movie or TV show has to have a moral, but if we're talking about this is truly a battle about good and evil, maybe this is a way to have a testament to say, like, look, all of these people from all these different nationalities and global ethnicities could come together to work for a common good. To overcome whatever darkness or struggle or whatever is happening. I mean, it's a little bit maybe too political on the nose, but in the context of this, it might actually work because it is a struggle over good and evil in the end of the day.
Well, it can be done too, and it doesn't have to be done with a hammer.
Yeah, definitely.
It can be done in a subtle kind of way where we find out in the course, if we're doing this over 10 hours, or if we're doing this over the course of several hours, there's an opportunity to make those small references to what's going on in other countries. And I think that can be done tastefully and quickly.
And another way we could go about it as well, because you're right, we don't want to hit people over the head with a hammer because nobody likes that. We could have, if we go with Jeff's route, having a trilogy of movies, which I'm all for. That's what I was going to bring up as well. And the globalization and the multicultural cast, we'll get to that later as well. I've got a lot of ideas there. But maybe the first movie and a half or first 2 movies could be North America centric. And then in the third movie is when it spreads to the rest of the world due to either government ineptness or Randall Flagg or his minions.
Okay, interesting.
I guess that also depends then on if you want to go with the flare or the flu.
They can both be the same thing.
The flare causes the flu.
But Aaron Peterson wants to know if there's robots involved. No, sorry, Aaron, no robots.
Well, maybe Andy makes an appearance. Maybe Andy is an assistant to Randall Flagg in Las Vegas.
Oh, there you go. Love Andy from the Dark Tower series.
Well, maybe you could have maybe the main gist of the cause of the problem is the flare, but you are dealing, because the flare happens, then a viral flu is released, and that mainly affects North America, but the flare affects the entire world. So you have kind of the super flu is a factor in North America because of the technology going down because of the flare. And so that can bring some of the aspects of the super flu in without it having to be the main thing.
That's a possibility. Okay. Because if you were to destroy technology, in a very short time, things like health and sanitation would become very, very problematic. So I think if we lose our technology, I think we're going to see a rise of illness and sickness as a natural course. And maybe it's something like that spreads and then becomes responsible for a good chunk of the population loss.
So one thing you said, Rem, was the Randall Flagg motivation. It never seems like he has the proper motivation to either hold Las Vegas or, I mean, ultimately evil just wants to take over the world at the end of the day. So what if we went with the solar flare happens on June 19th and it could be either in the 80s or present day, depending on how we want to do it, because it'll take out the EMP perspective. And then when that happens, it basically renders all of the technology useless so that we can't fight off things like the common cold. And the motivation then, instead of doing it in Boulder versus Las Vegas, let's just have it be people trying to figure out how to get vaccinations, and it's more of like a health crisis issue, and they have to descend on Atlanta and get to the CDC. And that's where Randall Flagg is held up, because he's controlling whether or not people live or die based on whether or not they can get the vaccinations. And so they have to basically attack Atlanta in order to take out Randall Flagg so that they could save humanity and then spread it to the rest of the world, which is why there's a global contingency. Maybe there's a war council of some kind, right, where they meet and they send delegates from each country to kind of do this battle to take on Atlanta.
So it becomes a little less of a fight against good and evil, or does it?
Well, it's still the fight to save humanity. And through the fight to save humanity, you end up realizing what is the good in us in order to make that achievable, versus turning to the darker ways, which would be, hoarding the stuff for ourselves.
Right. Seeing those polarities of good and bad in everybody come out.
The only thing I want to bring in here is I agree with Rem. I want to see more of the motivation for Randall Flagg. So I think within the longer point of view, we can have some of that motivation, because I don't want to see him just become a this opportunistic puppet dictator. But I want to see more of the evil that he is, and keep him tied into the King, multiverse, where there's this character that's, between multiple worlds. So I kind of don't want to lose that. So, I mean, he can be opportunistic, but I don't want to lose the darkness and the ties to the other world in whatever we do.
Totally agree.
So how do we do that and set it up that it makes sense for people that haven't seen like the Dark Tower or something else? Because I could totally see, like, maybe he's hoarding all of this, cures and things at the CDC because maybe there's an issue on this other world where he's actually in charge, and so he's trying to collect as much as he can from this Earth in order to take it to a different Earth.
Yeah. And since we have a practically unlimited budget and resources to work with all the studios, we will find a way where we can tie in these other universes. It's going to happen in our version of the tower and the stand and everywhere else where RF likes to roam and stroll across deserts and things like that.
I think, too, the focus, the thing that I did really like about the 94 version is there was a very clear demarcation between the sides. We've got Boulder, we've got Las Vegas. Boulder's good, Vegas is bad. the yin and the yang, and they're going to go to fight. And I think there's something about that I really enjoy, because you know what the stakes are and you know who the players are. And to be able to keep some sort of essential good versus bad battle in play, I really like that. But I'm curious as to how to, does that come down to sort of like the North versus the, if you go to parlance of Game of Thrones, and look at the good versus the evil there, that's a pretty clear demarcation point. And would we be able to have the same clear demarcation point here? Or do we want to have those shades of gray where, there's some good people in the bad camp, but there's also some bad people in the good camp?
Yeah, I think if we focus like Atlanta on being our center for, taking the place of Las Vegas, then we've got to have some type of staging area where these other countries can come and kind of meet up and make this, front against Atlanta, and have some type of separation between the two so that it is a not an easy journey between the two of those. I'm just not sure where that might be, to give it a good location to have that, this is a good camp and this is, where we're staging to go against Atlanta. Since Atlanta is pretty much a airfare hub, it would have to be someplace that, airfare or shipping or other places can come in that would be reasonably close to Atlanta.
Or we could keep with the mountain theme and maybe Nashville is the good center.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
Nashville,
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a site of music and good times and good memories. And
Yeah, I like that.
Although that's really cool, I really think we have to keep it with the Vegas side of things and keep in the spirit of the original story. And with it being more global, I think most of the rest of the world will recognize Las Vegas, Sin City, and I think the real Randall Flagg would want Vegas.
But wouldn't you also want to be at Elvis's Graceland? Really? Maybe not, but it's a thought. Randall Flagg at Graceland? I'm going to Graceland.
So maybe that's Mother Abigail's home instead of the old cabin.
Right.
No.
Oh, me.
That's funny.
So where have we landed so far? We're saying June 19th is when the event takes place. We definitely want to have the narration concept of the firstborn past solar flare to be kind of the guide as we go through our story. Now, do we want it to be a single 2-hour movie? Do we want it to be a 10-hour miniseries? Do we want it to be maybe a part 1 and part 2 kind of thing?
Ooh, can I make a suggestion?
Shoot.
10 hours, HBO.
So you want to do it like the actual remake intention?
I would do it, but I wouldn't give it to CBS. I would say HBO, you have to do this because HBO would do it right.
I'm with you there. I'm with you there with HBO because of just the subject matter and their experience with taking these long works. As far as the length, I'm fine. It needs to be more than one long movie. So I'm fine with if you're gonna make it, a decent length. I think if you can do it, definitely with 10 episodes. So I'm not sold on the length being 10 versus 3, but I think it needs to be more than one. And I agree, HBO is the way to go.
Yeah, and since 19 hours might be a bit too much, we can go with 10 to 12, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do a 10-hour miniseries on HBO. So solar flare wipes out 90% of the planet on June 19th, knocking out communication. Anybody have the preference for the 80s or present day?
I kind of like the idea of present day because one of the things that I was thinking about when considering the solar flare idea is our dependence on technology and the fact now that we go to the store to get everything that we need. And if you were to take somebody who lives in your average suburb anywhere in North America, throw them out in the bush, would they be able to survive? A lot of people are not going to be able to fish, hunt, identify plants. They won't be able to take care of themselves if they're hurt. Humanity, and it's going to sound awful to say, but from a survival perspective, humanity, well, anyway, in North America, is pretty weak. Take the power away, a lot of people are going to die in a big hurry. So I kind of think that in the current time is good because now is kind of when we're at our most technologically dependent.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And then
because you could find some surprising people in different groups or different areas that will buck the trend and really be able to rise to power for good or ill.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we have the visions, dreams concept to have a good and evil side, or do people just generally navigate that way by themselves?
I like having the visions.
Yeah, I do too, because that way it kind of sets it apart from other movies and properties that deal with the loss of technology. I think it brings a different level to things and makes it more original, and that was so key to the book as well.
I agree.
Do we have to explain why the visions happen?
No, we've got 10 to 12 hours to let people figure that out.
Yeah, and it's not as if it was those visions, people had their own interpretations even within the book. So I think that's fine. We know that there are two, and people are getting both. And see, that's the interesting thing. People are getting both sets of visions in the book. So it's open to interpretation there. So I don't think we have to delve into what specifically is causing those visions.
There's just some all-knowing force in the universe.
Possibly, or maybe there's midichlorians, or maybe there's a more psychic acuity as you take away the noise of technology. And
sure,
it's more listening to your inner voice.
Maybe,
because the technology is drowning it out. Okay, then cities. Did we decide on Atlanta or keep it original?
Keep it original. I vote.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, let's go with the original. Yeah,
so still Vegas and Boulder.
Oh, so good. I've still got my cut for later.
So then, what is the Randall Flagg motivation? Why is he holed up in Vegas? That's the hard one.
I just think it's because he's pure evil, and he's like Rem mentioned, an agent of chaos, and he's got other plans that deal with more than just this planet or this reality, and he just knows that this is a good starting point to go on. He's a megalomaniac, and he's a lot more evil than the version represented in the original or in Dark Tower.
So do we need to show that to the audience earlier, or are you happy with the dark man and the dreams? And I'm seeing this guy, I hear his name is Flagg, and all of a sudden someone magically just says, "Hey, Vegas is the place to go." Or do we need to see Vegas earlier on in the 10 episodes to get the clear establishment of Flagg is the one that's kind of organizing everything there, so we know why Vegas is so important?
I think there needs to be some sort of sense of why Flagg comes to power, and maybe he's been a person who's lived in Vegas all his life because that's just the energy he's drawn to naturally. But there needs to be some sort of explanation. I think you're right, Troy, as to why people would coalesce around him, and maybe he is a megalomaniac just waiting for his opportunity to rise to power, sort of like the survivalist cultures, or the survivalist groups, people who are sort of waiting for the apocalypse in their bunkers.
Yeah, and in the book there was a lot of talk about how he was involved with a lot of different movements, and he would be there, and then he would leave before that movement got took down. So to kind of relate it to us, maybe there are people around him in Vegas before the flare who are kind of marketing what he's selling, like that cult leader type of idea, and that's out there before the flare happens. And then people start, the susceptible people have kind of seen that, and then they start having these dreams, and they said, oh, that's, he's in Vegas because I remember seeing that. So maybe something like that to draw them to him because they've seen some type of material that people have produced earlier.
Yeah, the solar flare becomes kind of the force, the catalyst to say, hey,
to drive people to
exactly.
him,
Yeah, totally.
Could the flare also cause something to change in people as well?
Well, I didn't want to go too spiritual on that regard, but I was like, maybe the demonic possessioning from the other world is like, quote unquote, riding the solar flare and literally possesses Flag to give him the extra boost of confidence he needs, because maybe he's been trying to do this cult and get it started, but he's never been able to tip the scale. And so he gets this little extra kick from this possessor, if you will. I don't know if that's too demonic or too spiritual.
It does feel like does feel like there should be some sort of spiritual component or some sort of supernatural component. Do we need something like that? I kind of feel like that would be a good element to have.
Yeah. And I could see that this, like Troy said, this flare opens up because we talked about it, the lack of technology opening up the psychic stuff, but this flare opens up to more the spiritual powers are more able to have effect in this reality because of what the flare did to the reality. It was to kind of equate it back to the Dark Tower series when a beam broke. It just opened the worlds to more things happening and things happening at a progressed rate. So this flare opens up the ability of both spiritual sides to have more of an influence of power.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, so if we have the purpose for Flag existing, what's the purpose for the Boulder team to take him out? Is it just their imminent survival because he knows that they're going to move from Vegas and take over the country?
It could be that simple.
Yeah. I mean, I that's the motivation there. I mean, there was I think we've talked all around Flag, but we haven't talked Mother Abigail. So I think, the motivation for the people going after Flag is, yes, he is going to attack them maybe sooner or later. But I do think there has to be the Mother Abigail aspect of it, the white side of things, saying you can't just sit by and let things be. You're going to have to go and attack him because he's going to attack you, and that's what the white is demanding.
Make your stand.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's throw this idea out there, because I always found it difficult to buy into, I'm going to go find this crazy old lady in the middle of Nebraska. Even in the book. I thought that was I just thought it was a little far-fetched. Like, there's just this sweet old lady, she makes me some lemonade, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go march to my death. Sounds great. Thanks, Grandma.
But she still makes her own bread.
So
there you go.
So to go back to Rem's global idea, what if the remaining global leaders are nervous that Flag is kind of developing this huge army centralized in Vegas? And what if we have something called Project Abigail, where Project Abigail is to recruit the global people that need to come together in order to take on Flag specifically? Because I think that the spiritualness aspect of the light side, of the good side, is really their inner voice, like coming out, because they're able to hear their inner voice because of the lack of technology. Because if you think about it from a philosophy standpoint, that inner voice, people always thought that they were talking to God, but really it was just their own inner voice. So maybe we could play off it from that angle. And then Abigail is the project that they're executing in order to take Flag out.
It sounds pretty cool, and I know that what we're doing is remaking the miniseries. We're not necessarily trying to bring the book to life, but Troy, are you ready for the backlash from the diehard Stand fans around the world?
I don't know. You tell me. You guys are three of them. If you don't like it.
Personally, I think though I think we need a global recognition. I think if we introduce politics into it, I think that might be one more ball in the air that we'd have to juggle.
Like the Star Wars prequels. And
in the stand, our introduction to the government is mostly through the military, and that seems to be our biggest focus. And if we were to have people from other countries, because of a solar flare, that's going to inhibit travel because of the electronics being destroyed. That's going to knock down communication and also transportation. So transportation is going to be an issue. So people coming from other countries is going to be a very long, difficult process.
Yeah, I think if we're setting this in modern day, we live in even North America is so much more global than it was back then. There are people and refugees and from all over the world who are here in North America. So bringing them in as our look on the world is going to be easier because they're already here. So we maybe not the coalition of folks sent from other countries, but bringing in the global view of who, Abigail or this project is drawing, people from all different walks of life and ethnicities and backgrounds. So you bring in the global aspect of it there. Instead of, like Rem says, taking the long time to come overseas because of the hardness of travel after the flare.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. So I guess the question then becomes, do we want crazy spiritual lady versus some kind of government project? Because the military is really in charge of trying to figure out the super flu. Now that we've taken the super flu off the table, we can't just have... at least I don't think we can have just, mystically, we should just go to Vegas and take out this guy. There's got to be some kind of purpose or directional driving, a leader that has to get everybody together kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Otherwise, the audience might not buy into it too much.
I think we could do both. We could have a government operation of some sort that is wanting to do that, but we could have influences within that that bring in the spiritual aspect. The government is the remains of the government is wanting to address this issue, but you have people coming into that not necessarily because they totally buy into the government's point of view, but they have that spiritual point of view. Because in the book you had Nick, who never, he didn't really buy into the spiritual aspects of it, but he saw that this is what was right and what needed to be done. So he was joining into that, even though he didn't necessarily see eye to eye with Mother Abigail. So if you're looking at it as a government point of view, you've got this government center and they're wanting to address flag, but then you have people drawn to that, but that have the drawing not necessarily because of the government, but because of the spiritual aspect of it. So they're coming.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I think maybe what we do is this. So maybe it's initially the government response to the solar flare, right? They don't even know about Randall. Randall's just whatever, right? But it's this initial push to like reestablish the country. Like, how do we reestablish it? And as our group of people that are trying to go out and find people and get them kind of on board of what a new country is going to look like post-solar flare in this kind of 1800s dystopian past, if you will, then Randall Flagg attacks the government. He attacks like DC or something, wipes out the military while our people are in no man's land in the middle, right? They're in Nebraska or Boulder or wherever they end up being. And now that they realize, well, we have no military or country to go back to, but we also don't want to be taken over by this megalomaniac, we should push forward and do our own thing, listen to our own inner voice and do what's right.
I like that.
That's great.
Let's do it.
Because I think looking at the idea of having any kind of functional government acts as a protector for us. So suddenly we've got somebody to take care of us. We need to have the government taken away and to have the remnants of the government destroyed by flag. That's brilliant, Troy. I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Got it. Okay, well, I think we got a movie then.
Nice.
All right, so it's a 10-hour miniseries on HBO that is going to be caused on June 19th. The solar flare wipes out all technology and makes us susceptible to disease, famine, starvation, etc. So the military works on a group to figure out how to get the world back together. They call it Project Abigail. And then these people then journey out to recruit other people and help other people, doing good along the way, when a sinister cult leader rises up in Vegas because an entity has traveled from space on the solar flare to give him enhanced superpower capability to generate goodwill and benefits in Vegas and gets people on his side. He attacks the military, takes the military and the country out, leaving our Project Abigail people in the wilderness to fend for themselves, where they realize their inner strength to then take out Flag once and for all and get the country back on, good standing.
I think we've got a...
Sounds good.
I think we've got it here. Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, then, we do have to come up with who's going to be in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So who do we want to cast? I mean, because we can't cast, all 400,000 people in this thing.
True. But since it is going to be a 10 or 12 hour miniseries or season 1 of an event, I do think we need to cast like 5 or 6 or 7 of the people.
Yeah.
And as far as Randall Flagg, we need somebody that's going to be intense and really be able to pull off all of his mood swings and everything. I personally was thinking Adam Driver.
Ooh.
Okay. Interesting. I was trying to think of, I was looking at this, you want some people who are big, but not, huge because of salaries. I was thinking, somebody like Wentworth Miller, who's done, Prison Break, Flash, Legends, that kind of stuff, who's done the kind of things like that. But Driver is definitely interesting. Yeah.
Wayne, I have Adam Driver on my list as well.
Really?
I have him as a possible Larry Underwood.
Interesting, yeah.
But he has that intensity. Yeah, and you're right. Flag needs to be a dangerous, dangerous person.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to feel that very clearly.
And Driver could grow an awesome mullet.
If we go the mullet route. Sure.
The Driver mullet.
All right, so it sounds like everybody's cool with Driver for Flag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about Stu?
So I'm going to throw out somebody differently for Stu, a different take on Stu, and maybe it can be, since we're dealing with a little more international, I had him playing an American, but maybe he can play a British guy from Texas. I was thinking Aidan Turner, who's done... he's been the lead on the new Poldark series. He was in Being Human. He can play, range of emotions. I like him a lot as far as being able to show a lot of different emotions and depth that way. And he's somebody who's kind of up and coming, but not, a mega star.
Aidan Turner. He's got that really chiseled look. He's a good looking man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not super young. I think Stu needs to be a little bit older than Fran by maybe 5 or 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe as another option that we could vote on, maybe Justin Theroux from The Leftovers.
Oh, he's on my list as well. Okay, I've got a suggestion for Stuart Redman. I was thinking either, and I think it's probably a bad idea, but I do like Matthew McConaughey. But I was thinking, how about Josh Brolin? He's an older guy. He plays Southern really well. If you see him in a movie like No Country for Old Men, he's got that sensibility. But I'm open to possibilities. I've never seen Aidan Turner act before.
Yeah, like I said, Being Human, he did the dark. He's dealt with dark subject matter, and then the Poldark he's done with period pieces, and big supporting cast and playing well around them. So I don't know.
Let's go for that then. Aidan Turner, what do you think?
I'm going to vote Justin Theroux because I think he just has that same look and feel like Gary Sinise did. And Gary did a fairly decent job in the role. So I would lead more Justin.
I kind of like Justin Theroux myself. I really want to see him in here somewhere.
All right, he can be Stu. Maybe Aiden
Sure.
can have play somebody else.
Sure. Sounds good.
All right, so we'll do Justin for Stu, because that's a 3, unless someone has a cut.
Nope, not yet.
Nope, that's fine.
And we're still going with Driver for Flag. Anybody else we think we need to cast specifically?
We need to cast Fran Goldsmith.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of suggestions, and I just made a list, actually. I'm thinking possibly Zoe Saldana, Jennifer Connelly, Ellen Page, because Fran has to be based more on her strength than beauty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
She can't be an obviously beautiful, cosmopolitan model. Mm-hmm. Which is where I like Jennifer Connelly a lot, because Jennifer Connelly is a very attractive woman, but her power does not derive from her looks. What do you guys think?
So Billy Piper would be out.
Billy Piper? Billy Piper from Doctor Who?
Doctor Who. That would be interesting. And what's the age difference between her and who we've got as Stu? That's my question.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, Jennifer Connelly to me would be an out.
Yeah, because she's older.
I think Billy Piper's too pretty. I think so. I was thinking
too.
Going with just Emily Blunt.
I like Emily. Yes.
Emily Blunt, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I had somebody quite a bit younger. I had Isabel Vidovic, who's starred in Wonder. She's done stuff on iZombie and on Supergirl, so she's in that late high school range. Because I was thinking, that's where she needed to be. So, but I kind of like Rem's suggestion of Ellen Page, though. I like that.
Yeah, I can go with Ellen Page too.
I'll let you guys duke it out on those. Though Emily Blunt was pretty badass in Live, Die, Repeat.
Yeah, Emily Blunt's she's a good potential character as well. And I think she's got that strength where, obviously an attractive woman, but Fran needs to be more than looks.
Right.
There needs to be power. There needs to be strength there. And she really did do that in Edge of Tomorrow. Live, Die, Repeat.
Yeah. Let's go with her. I agree. I think her acting range is better for this. Yeah. I do. I like that.
What about moving then Ellen Page to the role of Randall Flagg's baby carrying mistress?
Oh, Nadine Cross.
Nadine. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that darkness. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or how about going more with the multicultural angle, just to flesh it out a bit? How about Maggie Q for Nadine Cross?
Maggie Q. Just going to look her up. Maggie Q. There she is.
Was in Designated Survivor.
Divergent as well.
Divergent? Eh? Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Possibility. I popped up with 3, actually. Surprisingly, Jennifer Lopez, but maybe not. The other person was Tatiana Maslany.
Yes.
And what about Summer Glau?
Summer, I think, is too recognizable, but...
Yeah.
Too recognizable? Okay.
I like Tatiana. I mean, she's an amazing actress from Orphan Black, and I don't think... I mean, people know her skills and acting abilities, but not to the degree that it needs to be. So she's a very good actress.
She could bring that dark side Nadine has.
Yeah, she's got such a range as a character.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're not going to... are we sold on that one then?
I think so.
Tatiana?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And even though it sounds like we're not going to actually have a Mother Abigail, maybe a Project Abigail, maybe Project Abigail could still have some sort of spokesperson or visual representation, whether it be on billboards or whatever. I was thinking Rihanna.
Ooh.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, I was just trying to think of actresses for that, and I was Christine Adams, who's fairly new. She's plays one of the leads in Black Lightning. She's fairly strong in that, but Rihanna would be interesting.
Rihanna. And she is around what age range is she?
What, about 35?
Rihanna?
Yeah.
But through the magic of Hollywood makeup? I don't know. It was just a thought. Maybe we don't even need a representation.
Well,
go
I
ahead.
was thinking that maybe
Troy.
if we need a military leader for Project Abigail specifically, why couldn't we have like a female general and go with Gina Torres?
Troy?
Yeah.
Troy, she's one of the 3 that I chose.
Definitely. She's got that strength and that military-esque, that I like that. I like that.
She's on my list of 3. I have Gina Torres, Regina King, and Angela Bassett.
So I think Angela Bassett has got a comeback coming on, so she might be too known or too much renowned now.
Yeah.
And then you have, if you went with Regina King, you have the tie to Justin Theroux with The Leftovers.
True. So Gina Torres, I think what's great about her is that she's not so oversaturated, but people will say, "Oh, Firefly," and I think she's got that sort of dark. She's got sort of like there's points in Firefly where she's sad. She's not happy and light and bubbly all the time, though there are comedic bits. But Gina Torres, I like.
Okay, so run them down quick. We got Justin Theroux as Stu, Adam Driver as Flag, Emily Blunt as Fran, Tatiana Maslany as Nadine Cross, and then Gina Torres will play our new Project Abigail military leader. Do we need a number 2 for Flag, Mr. Lou? It was Lou, was it not? I'm trying to.
No.
For Flag was Adam Driver, right?
No, his number 2, his right hand man.
Oh, that was
Lloyd.
So that was
Lloyd.
Yeah,
Lloyd. I knew it was an
Lloyd.
L. Lloyd.
Played
Lloyd Henreid. Yeah,
played
Miguel
by
Ferrer.
Miguel Ferrer.
Yeah, that would be good to have somebody in that spot as his number 2 to kind of bring that aspect of it in.
Want to go with somebody that could be physically threatening? Maybe Dave Bautista?
How about Rodrigo Santoro from Westworld?
I'm good with that.
Or Cillian Murphy, the actor who was in 28 Days Later?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I think he was also in Sunshine.
Or what about if we went with Ken Watanabe from The Last Samurai?
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
Sounds
definitely.
an exciting twist.
Yeah, I like that.
Go, Troy.
That.
I think we have 2 more we need to cast. Nick Andros and Harold Lauder.
No Larry Underwood in our version?
Well, it might be, but we don't
have
need
to
to cast him
him
for this.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay.
So do we need to cast Nick, or can it just be anybody?
I think we need to cast him, yeah.
Okay.
I've got 2 suggestions there.
Go. Go, Rem, go.
Jared Leto or Daniel Kaluuya, who was in Get Out.
Not familiar.
He's African American actor, and he was in Get Out, and he played the guy who had gone to meet the white family with his white girlfriend, and he has a visual range, like his facial expressions, really great physical presence and great facial expressions for a character that would be mute.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I like that.
Let's do it.
So I think we're good then. So we got Stu, we got Flag, we got Fran, we got Nadine Cross, we got a leader, we got Lloyd, and then we got Nick.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Great start.
Yeah.
Awesome. So then we have a few nostalgic moments we need to have in the movie. There has to be a small town market where our nutjob criminals, Poke and Lloyd, try to rob the place and cause some mayhem.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Pokerize them.
We'll need a cabin where our now cast female general military person Gina Torres tells Nick that God believes in you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
And then somewhere throughout the production, we have to have a crow flying around.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have to have a shot of the moon.
Of course we do.
Maybe.
And in that scene in that small town market where there's the mayhem, I would love to see that cowboy looking man that really blows the thieves away. I would like to have him look just like Clint Eastwood's classic Western gunslinger, as a wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah.
there you
Instead
go.
of a guy
Definitely.
wearing suspenders.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we want to talk director?
Yes, we do need a director.
Okay. I'm going to throw out, especially since we're doing this as a TV episodic type deal, Danny Cannon, who kind of grew up doing the CSI and that kind of stuff, but he's been Gotham's EP for the entire run, and he can take source material and make it something new. He's used to working with dark because he does it. He works really well with characters as far as getting the actors into character and helping them grow in those characters. So that was my toss out on the director.
He's also done the pilot for Alcatraz, The Tomorrow People, The Lottery, Training Day, the TV series, as well as the CSI.
Judge Dredd.
I'm okay with that.
Rem, you got some ideas?
I do. As far as directors go, the one that really stands out to me is Mimi Leader, who I first noticed when she did Deep Impact, when that movie came out, and Armageddon came out 3 months later. And she also has been very instrumental in working on The Leftovers. And I think what I like about her is she's really great at character development and moving characters and developing characters we care about. So she would be the one that I would toss out as a potential.
What if we did directed by Danny or executive produced by Danny, written by Mimi? It is a TV series. They can work together.
Okay. Yeah. Because as a writer, I think she would be awesome as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could go for that.
Sweet.
Or
what do you have, Wayne?
And no, Troy, I'm not going to go with M. Night Shyamalan.
or David Lindelof, because you already got that card played.
How do I have that card played?
I thought we had David Lindelof in the last one we did. For the, what was it? Did we do it for Dreamcatcher?
Wasn't I outvoted?
I don't know. I don't remember. We'll have to go back to the
let me
tape.
just throw it out there. I think Damon Lindelof can bring, as we saw from Lost, the greatest TV series of all time, and The Leftovers, the second best TV series of all time, that Damon Lindelof can bring the surreal that I think a story like this needs to really set it apart from everything else, even all of the other great shows that are on HBO. I think Damon Lindelof can help set this apart.
I love you, Wayne.
And if I'm,
but I'm going to cut you out.
I was going to cut myself back in.
Too slow. You can't cut the cut.
If Troy didn't cut you, I was going to. Sorry, Wayne.
See, Wayne, I like that. I could see him as, if not a director, maybe a producer.
Why not? But listener of the Remake This Movie Right podcast, if you would like to put in votes as Damon Lindelof if one of the other choices is busy, there is the Facebook post for this episode. Let your thoughts be known. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. All right, so we got the cast, we got the director. Why don't we go ahead and hear one of the final showdowns between our good people and Randall Flagg in Las Vegas from the 1994 miniseries, The Stand.
Listen to me! All of you! I don't expect you to stop this, but you better remember what you see here tonight. Because the next time it may be your turn to die this way.
Finished, Mr. Underwood?
You're the one who's finished.
I take that as a yes. I, Randall Flagg, do hereby state that
Why don't you tell him your real name?
Do hereby state that these men are the insurrectionists responsible for the destruction of our unarmed scout planes at Indian Springs and for the murder of Carl Huff. For these crimes, they are sentenced to death by dismemberment.
All right, as we like to do here on Remake This Movie Right, as we have a movie, we like to present it to you in movie trailer form, presented by MediaVoiceovers.com. One and only Mr. Wayne Henderson, who's here on the show tonight. So I'm really excited to see how you're going to do this live. Oh, wait, you're not going to do it live?
No pressure.
Okay, well, here is Wayne Henderson's version of our remake, The Stand.
On June 19th, a solar flare will alter the future of all mankind, wiping out technology and leaving humans susceptible to disease, famine, starvation, and other horrors. Humans are fighting to survive. The United States military launches Project Abigail, whose sole purpose is to restore the world to its rightful plane of existence. Unfortunately, they cross paths with a mysterious man with an influence so fierce, he may just be the devil incarnate. With his vast powers, he effectively demolishes the military and the world at large, leaving the few left to decide whether their own mortality is worth risking their very lives for. HBO is finally giving Stephen King the canvas he deserves to tell one of the greatest stories of our time in a 10-part miniseries event you cannot miss. Next year, the human race is coming for Randall Flagg. This is not their end. This is The Stand.
Well done, sir.
Oh,
Very
man.
nice.
Nice job,
I
Wayne.
can't
Nice.
believe it.
The professional strikes again.
Well, for the penultimate time here on the Remake This Movie Right podcast, got to bring it for The Stand.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, if you enjoyed our remake here of The Stand, you can obviously email us at remakethismovieright@gmail.com. If you have your own pitch and think you can do it better, you can send that in as well. Again, Wayne Henderson can be found at mediavoiceovers.com if you'd like to hire him for any voiceover work for things that you'd like to do. Rem, where can people find you?
Well, I do the sci-fi movie podcast at sci-fi-moviepodcast.com. You can put a little dash between the sci-fi, leave it in, take it out, whatever you like. It'll still take you to the same place. Right now, my partner Jonathan and I, we've both gone through some big job transitions. So we're taking a break from the podcast for the summer, and we'll probably be coming back and doing something in the fall.
And that's Phi with an I.
Sci-fi with an I.
Jeff Gentry.
Well, you can hear me with good Sir Wayne on the Castle Zone podcast this summer. We've got an episode out now, kind of giving the overview, and we'll be covering every episode of Hulu's Castle Rock. And you can also find me on Gotham Undercover, both on Golden Spiral Media.
And in addition to the Castle Rock Zone podcast at castlerockzone.com, coming up this fall, Sir Troy, we will be back for the very victory-filled season of the Packers Fan Podcast.
100 seasons of Packers football.
And you believe it, that's a lot of Packers greatness right there.
It sure
and
is.
some that wasn't quite as great, but hey.
Well, I am your host, Ed Troy Heinrichs, this week. Aaron will be back on the next Remake This Movie Right, so don't go anywhere. Make sure you subscribe and review us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or your podcast app of choice. You can follow us on Twitter at Remake Right. Again, visit the website at remakethismovieright.com, and make sure you share this episode with all of your friends on social media, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, etc., because we want to make sure everybody sees the good version of The Stand done by all of us. So the credits have rolled on this remake, but be sure to come back for our next one. Remember that every film you love will get a reboot someday, and only you can remake this movie right.